What if this message is not a coincidence, but a divine signal that your breakthrough has already happened? If you're seeing this, it's not by chance. You've stepped into alignment with a truth far greater than your current reality. Your winning season has already begun, not because you earned it, but because you dared to assume it. In this message, we'll journey inward to understand how your imagination is the seed of victory, and how feeling the wish fulfilled is the only condition for it to bloom. I remember one night I was in a small room in New York, alone with barely enough to eat. The world around me didn't reflect success, nor did it suggest a winning season. But I did something that night, something bold, something the world would call foolish. I imagined myself as successful. I assumed it. I walked the room as though I had already won. And here's the truth. I did not pray for victory. I assumed the feeling of already being victorious. Days passed, then weeks. Then, like a thread pulling from the invisible, life began to rearrange itself. Opportunities I had not chased arrived. People I had not sought made way for my manifestation. And it all came because I dared to feel the end before the beginning. I want to show you now how this works. How your winning season begins not out there, but within. Your senses will deceive you if you let them. They will say nothing has changed. But assumption is not about reacting to what is. It's about selecting what shall be. You must assume your victory. Not tomorrow, not when things improve, but now. If you're seeing this message, it's because at some level, your soul is ready to say it is done. This is your divine permission slip to stop waiting from the end and start living from the end. To live in the end means you embody the feeling of your fulfilled desire, as though you just returned from the future. You're not creating it, you are aligning with it. Victory is not something to hope for, it is something you move into by imagination. Feel the triumph, rest in the joy. Your outer world must reflect what your inner world has stabilized. The world is clay, and imagination is the sculptor. Every time you feel the wish fulfilled, you impress the subconscious. Repetition of that feeling creates structure. You are not hoping anymore, you are feeling with conviction. That conviction is the mold into which your reality will be poured. You cannot wait for the five senses to agree with your desire. You must shift into your new self by sheer faith in imagination. This is not blind faith. This is conscious manifestation. The unseen is more real than the seen. Your future victory is already formed. You must now walk by assumption, not by sight. There will be moments when nothing seems to move, when your current reality looks untouched. But those are the most critical moments to persist. The bridge of incidence is being built in silence. Stay loyal to your inner scene. Keep assuming, keep thanking, and above all, keep feeling it real. To win, you do not need more effort, you need more consistency of vision. The mind repeats what it truly believes. So rehearse your triumph until it becomes unconscious. Let your victory live in your inner conversations, your self-talk, your dreams. Let every idle moment return to the miracle mindset. The truth is, you're not trying to get something you don't have. You're simply claiming what has always been yours in potential. The moment you believe with emotional certainty that it is already done, your world begins to bow to your assumption. You are not broken. You are becoming whole by remembering no external condition determines your destiny. It is not jobs, not people, not timing. Only one condition determines your winning season, your assumption. Your world is yourself pushed out. Once you accept your success within, the world becomes the mirror of your conviction. This is the law. Your present circumstances may seem fixed, limited, or even unjust, but the truth is that you are not at the mercy of the world. You are at the mercy of your assumptions. And the boldest assumption you can ever make is this: I have already won. This is not arrogance. This is not delusion. This is law. The moment you assume your victory, even before a single fact confirms it, the world begins to mold itself around that inner conviction. The outer world is a delayed reflection of the inner state. The change does not happen because the world improves. The world improves because the inner man changed his posture. You are not called to observe your life like a bystander. You are called to govern it from within. And you do that by assumption. When I say assume your victory, I mean feel, believe, and act as though the desire you hold in your heart is already fulfilled. But most do not do this. Most wait. They wait for facts. They wait for evidence. They wait for people to give permission. And in the waiting, they unknowingly affirm the lack of what they want. They are worshipping the absence. But the one who dares to assume lives from the end. He no longer petitions the future, he lives in the result. To assume something contrary to the facts, that is the true test. That is the very definition of faith in action. The senses will scream that nothing has changed. The world will mock you for your confidence. Your bank account will show the same numbers. The phone won't ring with the offer you imagined. Not yet. But here is where power lives. If you persist in the assumption, despite what the senses reveal, the world must eventually conform, because the world has no power to resist the persistence of a spiritually awakened imagination. So how does one assume victory when there's no visible sign? You begin in the mind. Close the eyes and dwell in the feeling of triumph, not the wish to win, the feeling that you already have. How would you move, talk, walk, and think if your goal were realized right now? What would be different? Would you still worry about money? Would you still fear rejection? Would you feel small in rooms full of influence? Or would you feel stable, grounded, and at ease in your own success? That feeling is the key. You must learn to make that your home, to let your subconscious feel that it is not imagining something impossible, but remembering something already real. Everything begins in imagination. All structure, all careers, all relationships, all blessings, all first existed in someone's unseen world. And then over time, the outer reflected what the inner assumed as true. When you assume your victory, you create a new internal atmosphere. The words you speak to yourself change, your posture shifts, your expectations sharpen, the actions you take, though subtle, begin to align with a higher pattern. You're no longer chasing, you're allowing. And in this allowing, the bridge of incidents will unfold. You are not here to beg life for what you want. You are here to declare what you are and let the world prove you right. Your identity determines your destiny. So if you see yourself as the defeated, life brings evidence of struggle. But if you see yourself as already triumphant, the doors must open. It is not a question of if, only when. And the when is determined by the depth and consistency of your assumption. Think of the seed buried in darkness. It has no sunlight, no wind, no confirmation that it is growing, but it assumes its nature. It doesn't beg to be a tree, it assumes the role, even when invisible, and in due season, what was assumed breaks through the surface. So it is with you. Your job is not to inspect the soil every day for progress. Your job is to water your assumption, to feel the joy of already having, and to protect that internal atmosphere from doubt. Many people try to use force. They think hustling, striving, and worrying will move life. But life is moved by law. And the law responds not to desperation, but to alignment. You align by becoming it first inwardly. You assume it. You walk in it mentally. And you do not waver when nothing seems to change. That is the test. And that is where most give up. Right before the tide turns, you are not broken. You are not blocked. You are simply being invited to choose a new premise. Victory is not something you chase. It is something you accept. It's not earned by worthiness. It's claimed by consciousness. And you cannot fake consciousness. The feeling must be real to you. But once it is, once you say, I am now the one I once hoped to be, and believe it, then the whole world must rearrange itself to echo that inner song. If you're seeing this, it's not just a message, it's an invitation. An inner call to stop waiting and start being. This is the beginning of your winning season. Not because I said so, not because of some external omen, but because you now assume it to be so. And as you assume, so shall you become. To live in the end is to embody the state of already being the one you desire to be. This is not a metaphor, it is the literal secret behind transformation. You do not wait for life to give you a signal that you may now feel successful, loved, healed, or wealthy. You move into that feeling now, before the evidence, and dwell in it as though it were the only truth. Living in the end is not performance, it is possession. It is the deep conviction that what you feel inwardly is more real than what you see outwardly, because the inner world is cause, and the outer merely effect. Most individuals live life from a place of reaction. They are constantly adjusting their inner states based on what their senses report. If money is low, they feel fear. If people reject them, they feel small. If they are ignored, they feel unworthy. And so the senses become their God, always instructing them how to feel, how to think, how to imagine. But the one who lives in the end is no longer ruled by fact. He rules facts by becoming a different being inwardly. He no longer reacts to the current state. He selects the desired one and abides in it. He does not visit this state on occasion. He makes it his home. There is a profound difference between hoping for a better life and assuming the life you desire is already yours. Hope keeps you in waiting, but assumption moves you into possession. Living in the end does not mean pretending, it means remembering. If you have ever experienced a moment of joy, success, or love in imagination so vividly that you could feel it in your bones, then you know what it means to live in the end. It is the acceptance, without outer proof, that the thing longed for is now present in consciousness, and therefore must become present in form. You are never trying to attract something from outside of you. That is a misunderstanding. All things exist now. There are infinite states of being available to you at any moment. The only reason you do not experience one state is because you have not moved into it with conviction. Every state has its own conditions, behaviors, feelings, and outcomes. You do not get what you want. You get who you are. When you live in the end of a fulfilled desire, you are not bending reality. You are stepping into the version of yourself that already lives there. This is why imagination is the key. Through imagination, you can construct the scene, the feeling, the inner atmosphere of your fulfilled desire. And once you do, your task is not to make it happen. Your task is to return to that scene again and again until it becomes natural, until it becomes familiar, until the new state is no longer visited, but lived in. Just as you do not need to remind yourself each day who you are in name or identity, you must reach a point where your fulfilled state is so natural to you that you no longer wonder if it will happen, because it already has within. There is no power in effort alone. Effort without assumption is wasted movement. But when your actions are aligned with a settled inner conviction, they are no longer effort. They are expressions of an inner truth. The one who lives in the end walks differently, speaks differently, thinks differently, not because he is trying to convince others, but because he has convinced himself. And that is all that is ever required. The great shift occurs when you stop trying to change the world and instead change your concept of self. When you realize that the world is a mirror, you no longer attack the reflection. You change the source. If you do not like what you see, you do not beg the mirror to adjust. You adjust your face, your posture, your expression, and the mirror reflects it back without resistance. So it is with life. When you begin to live in the end, you stop negotiating with reality and start declaring a new identity. The world cannot do anything but comply with the new image you hold of yourself. The test of whether you are truly living in the end is not the absence of challenge. The test is how quickly you return to the inner state despite the challenge. Can you, in the midst of contradiction, assume your success? Can you, while nothing moves, feel the thrill of your answered prayer? Can you carry the joy of the fulfilled desire even while your world denies it? That is the power. That is living in the end. You must treat your inner world with greater reverence than the outer. When you create a scene in imagination, one where the desire is complete, where the dream is real, where yourself is elevated, and you feel it as true, that scene becomes your reality, not in time, but in experience. And experience is what governs manifestation. The world must then rearrange itself. People, events, conditions, all must move to fulfill what you have assumed as done, not because you forced it, but because you lived it. Living in the end is not reserved for a few spiritual elite. It is your birthright. You are doing it all the time, just often unconsciously. Every time you dwell in a feeling of fear, worry, lack, or doubt, you are living in the end of that state. So if you can live in the end of your fears so easily, why not live in the end of your fulfillment deliberately? That is the invitation, that is the path, and that is how your winning season begins. Not when life shows it, but when you no longer need life to show it, because you've already felt it. Real. You do not change your world by effort. You change it by feeling it real. This is the law. The moment you feel something with the intensity and conviction of inner truth, it imprints upon your subconscious mind, and what is impressed upon the subconscious is always expressed. This is not poetic language. This is the precise mechanism by which reality conforms to your inner assumptions. The world does not respond to begging, nor to struggle, nor to hours of toil. It responds to feeling. The rich, inner knowing that what you have imagined is already yours. When you learn to feel your desire is fulfilled, you are not fantasizing. You are initiating the spiritual cause from which all physical effects must flow. And this feeling, this inner vibration, is the only tool you need. Everything else becomes a bridge that arises from the moment you touch the end emotionally. You are not required to figure out the how. You are not instructed to manipulate circumstances or chase outcomes. You are asked only to enter the feeling of the wish fulfilled and remain there long enough that it saturates your being. Most people believe that results come from outer movement, but true movement is psychological. The mind that dares to claim a new state inwardly will see that state externalized with mathematical precision. But the majority are still waiting. They pray and wait. They hope and wait. They study and wait. And all the while they refuse to engage the only faculty that changes reality: imagination fused with emotion. We look out into the world and say, I will feel successful when I get the promotion. They say, I will feel loved when someone chooses me, but they misunderstand. They have reversed the sequence. The feeling does not come after the event. The event comes after the feeling. And until you reverse that inner logic, you will remain suspended in a loop of almost and nevers. Feeling it real means you must abandon the senses, and you must turn away from what is and look into what could be, and then claim it as though it is. You must allow your inner world to become so convincing, so satisfying, that it becomes more compelling than the facts that surround you. This is not denial of the senses, this is mastery over them. The senses report the past, they echo previous assumptions, but your imagination creates the future. And the only material it needs to build that future is the emotion that corresponds to your desired outcome. So how do you feel it real? You must go within. You must find a quiet place and silence the outer noise. And in that stillness, you begin to imagine a scene, a short, simple scene that implies your desire is already fulfilled. You see it in your mind's eye, you hear it, you touch it, but most importantly, you feel it. You feel the excitement, the gratitude, the contentment that would arise if that scene were true. And in that moment, you are no longer imagining, you are becoming. You have moved from desiring into being. And this shift, subtle though it may seem, is the turning point of all manifestation. When this feeling becomes natural to you, when it is no longer a distant dream, but a familiar vibration, the outer world must bow. It cannot remain as it was. People will change. Opportunities will appear. Events will unfold. Not because you forced them, but because you changed the root assumption. You no longer hoped, you believed. And that belief was not abstract. It was emotional, it was felt. The subconscious mind, which governs your experience, does not respond to words. It does not respond to logic. It responds only to feeling. That is its language. If you speak to it through effort, it remains unmoved. But speak to it through the feeling of already having, and it is compelled to externalize that new truth. So every time you return to your wish fulfilled in imagination, you are re-educating the subconscious. You are rewriting the code by which your life unfolds. This is why repetition is sacred, not for the sake of ritual, but for the sake of saturation. Each time you feel the wish fulfilled, you deepen the groove in your inner world, and eventually that groove becomes a natural state. And once it becomes natural, it becomes inevitable. What was once only imagined becomes experienced. What was once only felt becomes seen. This is not a miracle in the mystical sense, it is law. Feeling it real also requires honesty. You must not pretend to feel something you do not. You must not force a vibration. You must find a way to authentically touch the feeling of the end. If you cannot reach joy, reach peace. If peace feels too distant, reach relief. And from there, spiral upward. The goal is not to perform, but to persuade yourself gently, sincerely, consistently. You are not tricking the universe. You are aligning your inner self with the version of you that already lives in that fulfilled state. The bridge of incidents that leads you to your desire may appear random. It may even look like obstacles, but all of it is connected. The path is laid the moment the feeling is accepted. You do not need to manage the path. You need only to stay faithful to the state. Let the world do what it must. Let time play its role. Your task is singular. Feel the end. Feel it with such depth, such clarity, that it becomes more real to you than the facts in front of you. And then let life surprise you with its obedience to your imagination. The moment you begin to shift your attention away from what the senses dictate and place it deliberately on the unseen reality, you begin the sacred work of transforming your life from within. The world you observe around you is not the source of your outcomes. It is a reflection of your assumptions, beliefs, and persistent inner conversations. You do not shift your external world by battling its contents. You shift your reality by moving inward, by abandoning your allegiance to appearances, and choosing to rest your identity in the unseen. The unseen is not imaginary. The unseen is the cause. The world of senses is the effect. To trust the unseen is to acknowledge the creative force that animates every visible thing. It is to say, I no longer believe in what I see, I believe in what I feel. And this feeling, when aligned with the end you desire, becomes the magnet that pulls that reality into form. The reason most people fail to manifest change is because they continue to serve two masters. They attempt to imagine something better while continuing to worship what is. But you cannot occupy two states at once. You are either the old man or the new. You are either the version of yourself still waiting or the one who has already received. The unseen reality is more structurally real than what your eyes report. What you see in your outer world is simply hardened emotion, past assumptions that have crystallized into circumstance. They are not permanent. They are echoes. And the one who begins to awaken understands that just as these outer facts were formed by prior beliefs, new beliefs will displace them. But this shift does not come through striving. It comes through a change in focus. You must stop giving the outer world your power and begin to give that power back to the unseen. The great lie is that change begins on the outside, that more money, better opportunities, or kinder people will bring you peace. But the truth is that peace precedes those things. When you enter the state of peace, when you feel successful, safe, wanted, or abundant, before anything has happened. Then and only then will the world respond accordingly. Reality is delayed response. There is no outer movement that is not first preceded by inner movement, and that inner movement is invisible. It is the moment when you say to yourself, though nothing appears different, I know it is done. To know something is done when the world denies it is to access a higher law. It is to remove yourself from the plane of appearances and rise into the spiritual dimension of causation. And once you reside there, you are no longer subject to delay, confusion, or contradiction. You may see things that seem opposed to your desire, but you will not react, because your inner eye is fixed. And when the inner eye is fixed, the outer world must yield. Trusting the unseen is the greatest form of authority you can express. It is to take dominion over your state of being and say, what I feel in imagination is more real to me than what the world says is true. It is not foolishness, it is not delusion. It is the very method by which everything you admire was first formed. Every great work, every great relationship, every fortune, and every healing was first a vibration, an assumption, an unseen act of faith that became visible only after it had been fully felt. The spiritual man lives not by the reports of the five senses, but by the convictions of the sixth sense, imagination. He walks through the same world as others, but sees differently. When he encounters a closed door, he does not feel fear, he feels expectation, because he knows the door is part of the process, not the proof. He knows that what appears to be resistance is often the very soil in which the seed of his new state is being nurtured. Every time you shift your awareness away from what is and direct it toward what could be, then feel it as what is, you are exercising dominion over your world. You are not escaping, you are reclaiming your role as creator. Your current identity was once invisible. You were not born into it fully formed. It was shaped by previous beliefs, inherited ideas, and repeated emotional states. And just as that identity was built, so too can it be changed, not through willpower, but through assumption. You must now begin to assume the feeling of the unseen as often as you can. Let it live in your imagination, let it color your conversations, let it guide your responses, not as performance, but as habit, the habit of being the one who already is. Speak as one who knows, think as one who is fulfilled, walk as one who has already received, and the world will in time echo that assumption in detail. You are not here to be a passive observer of facts. You are here to be the author of new ones. And you write these new facts by withdrawing attention from appearances and placing your energy in the unseen reality of your choosing. This is not escapism, it is precision. You are training the inner man to hold steady when all things fluctuate. You are becoming immune to the old story, and in doing so, the new must rise, not by effort, not by manipulation, but by law. The unseen believed is the seen manifested. That is the secret. That is the shift. That is how your winning season becomes inevitable. Persistence in assumption is the master key that opens the door to every desired reality. You cannot assume something once and expect the universe to bow. The spiritual law requires steadiness, not mere emotional bursts of enthusiasm, but a quiet, unwavering conviction that holds firm even when nothing in the outer world changes. What you persist in assuming, you inevitably experience. This is not a matter of morality, but of structure. Reality is designed to reflect your dominant state. So if your assumption is brief, inconsistent, or easily broken by doubt, the result will be equally fleeting, unstable, or absent. When you enter the state of the wish fulfilled, you begin the process of impressing your subconscious with a new identity. But one impression alone is rarely enough to dislodge years of contrary beliefs. The mind is like wax, and impressions are like stamps. The more often you press the new image, the deeper the impression. And once the image is deep enough, it becomes permanent. This permanence is what you call reality. Reality is nothing more than a hardened assumption, one that you have persisted in long enough for it to become your environment. Many make the mistake of giving up too soon. They imagine for a day or two, they feel inspired briefly, and then they open their eyes and say nothing has changed. And with that statement, they undo the inner work, because they are still measuring by sight. But those who understand the law do not measure by outer evidence, they measure by inner alignment. If you can feel the state, live from it, think from it, and return to it regardless of contradiction, then it must outpicture, not by chance, not by favor, but by law. When the outer world shows no movement, that is the moment of true testing. It is not a signal to abandon your assumption, it is the call to deepen it. Imagine a seed planted in the ground. For days or even weeks, there may be no sign of growth above the surface, but beneath the soil, life is forming, roots are stretching, systems are building, and structure is being born. If one were to dig it up daily to check for progress, they would destroy its development. So it is with assumption. What you assume in silence must be trusted in silence. You persist not by force, but by loyalty. Loyalty to the unseen. Loyalty to the vision you have chosen to dwell in. The feeling of the wish fulfilled must become your new home. A home is not visited, it is lived in. So your assumption must become so familiar that it no longer feels like hope, it feels like fact. When others speak of delay, you speak of completion. When others speak of lack, you speak of lack of completion, not to convince them, but because it is your internal truth. The outer world will often challenge your new state, not maliciously, but mechanically. The echoes of your former beliefs may still play out for a time. Old conditions may persist while the new state solidifies, but if you remain loyal to the new identity, those conditions must dissolve. They cannot survive in a mind that no longer agrees with them. It is not your job to push them out. It is your job to deny them attention. And the more you feed your new assumption with focus, feeling, and repetition, the faster the old must fade. Persistence is not about length of time, it is about quality of faith. One can persist for days in anxiety and achieve nothing. Another may persist for a moment in pure feeling and shift everything. The difference is depth. When your assumption reaches the depth of belief, it becomes creative. The subconscious does not require time, it requires conviction. And once it receives the conviction, the bridge of incidents begins to form. Events will unfold, people will move, circumstances will shift, not by your design, but by the divine pattern already encoded in your assumption. To persist is to choose over and over again. Even in doubt, you return. Even in fear, you return. Even when your senses betray you, you return to the feeling of your fulfilled desire. This return is the sacred act. It is a polishing of your spiritual lens. Each return burns away a layer of resistance. And in time, resistance gives way to receptivity. You become magnetic. Life rushes to meet the image you hold steady. You do not chase your manifestation, you receive it. But reception requires readiness, and readiness is built through repetition. As a potter shapes clay by hand, so too must you shape your inner state by continual feeling. Every time you feel your desire as done, you mold yourself. You become the vessel that can hold what you have asked for. And the universe, which is always listening, responds not to your pleas, but to your preparation. There is no power greater than a mind that refuses to let go of its vision. Such a mind becomes the master of destiny. Because it does not seek signs, it becomes the sign. It does not need permission, it gives itself permission. And the world, like a shadow, obeys. Not because it wants to, but because it must. So when nothing is moving, remember this. Your assumption is still at work. It is building in silence. Trust the silence. Respect the invisible. And above all, persist, not by force, but by faith. Faith that what you feel within must, by the nature of all things, appear without. This is how worlds are changed. Not by might, not by striving, but by the quiet persistence of a soul that knows it is already done. Breakthrough is not a matter of force but of rhythm. Just as nature never rushes, and yet everything is accomplished, so too does your inner world produce results through the gentle power of repetition. The transformation of your state of being does not occur through dramatic outbursts of effort, but through quiet, repeated impressions that become the texture of your mind. If you desire to see a change in your world, you must become faithful to the inner image, and this faithfulness must be maintained through repetition. Not mindless, mechanical repetition, but intentional, emotional revisiting of your fulfilled desire. The mind naturally returns to what it believes. And what it believes is determined by what it has heard and felt the most. Therefore, if you repeat a thought often enough, if you feel its truth in imagination until it becomes familiar, it will eventually be accepted as real. And once accepted, it must be expressed. That is the law. The subconscious does not argue. It receives the idea that is most emotionally charged and repeated, and sets into motion the mechanism by which that idea is externalized. Most people repeat the state of fear. They rehearse failure, rejection, disappointment, not deliberately but by habit. They imagine worst-case scenarios, revisit painful memories, and anticipate lack. And because they do this often, they feel it is normal. But repetition does not distinguish between what is wanted and what is feared. It only deepens what is focused upon. So if you desire a breakthrough, you must reverse this pattern and begin to rehearse the outcome you want, as though it were already yours. There is no virtue in dwelling on what you do not wish to experience. To complain, to dwell in limitation, to rehearse the story of being stuck, is to re-imprint the very condition you wish to be free from. The mind, like a garden, grows whatever seed is planted and watered. If you want roses, you do not plant thorns. If you want abundance, you do not feed thoughts of lack. It is not difficult to change your life. It is simply a matter of changing what you repeat. The most powerful use of repetition is to construct and dwell in inner scenes that imply the fulfillment of your desire. These scenes must be short, vivid, and emotionally satisfying. For example, if your desire is to feel financially secure, do not repeat vague affirmations. Instead, construct a scene where you are joyfully handing a gift to someone you love, or receiving news of an abundant outcome. Feel the ease, the freedom, the gratitude. And then repeat that scene until it becomes a mental reflex. That reflex, when strong enough, will draw to you the outer equivalents. There is no magic in words alone. Words without feeling are powerless. It is the feeling you generate through repetition that creates the breakthrough. The subconscious does not respond to phrases. It responds to vibration. So your task is not to speak your desire into the void, but to feel it so consistently that your entire being begins to agree with it. When this agreement occurs, the outer world must mirror the new state. This process requires commitment, not effort. There is a difference between striving and practicing. Striving implies desperation, practicing implies mastery. And the one who repeats his new state daily, joyfully, with expectancy, is not hoping for change, he is becoming the change. He is not looking for proof, he is living from proof. That repetition becomes the inner soil in which new conditions germinate. Many ask, how long must I repeat this before I see results? But this question reveals a misunderstanding of the law. You do not repeat your desire to make something happen. You repeat your desire to make it natural to you. Once it feels natural, once it feels like home, your world will automatically reflect it. The goal is not to force reality into submission. The goal is to become so inwardly convinced that no contrary condition can unsettle you. And here lies the real breakthrough. When your desire becomes more real to you than your current facts, your facts must change. When you rehearse your success more often than you recall your failures, success becomes inevitable. When you return to the scene of fulfillment more frequently than the scene of frustration, your inner world shifts. And that shift rewrites the script of your life. You are the actor, the director, and the audience. And the scene you rehearse inwardly is the only scene life will perform for you outwardly. If you change your rehearsal, you change the performance. If you change your lines, you change your outcome. Do not say you are stuck. Say you are being trained. Do not say you are lost. Say you are being rerouted. These repeated impressions become the blueprint of your experience. There is a sacred momentum that builds through repetition. What begins as a fragile idea becomes a conviction. What begins as imagination becomes embodiment. The breakthrough does not arrive from outside of you. It emerges from your consistency, your willingness to return again and again to the same state, even when nothing appears to be happening. That invisible repetition is the foundation upon which all visible changes rest. So take your desire and turn it into an emotional practice. Let it live in your imagination. Visit it when you wake. Return to it before you sleep. Whisper it in your silent thoughts throughout the day, not as a duty, but as a delight. And soon what you repeated inwardly will become the rhythm of your world. The breakthrough is not far off. It is born from within. One repetition at a time. You must come to the realization that what you seek is already yours, not in the sense of a far-off promise, but in the absolute sense of spiritual possession. You are not striving toward your desire, you are returning to it. The concept of waiting for manifestation is a subtle denial of truth. The truth is you already are. You already have. You already possess. The idea that your desire exists somewhere outside of you is illusion. All things exist now, and they exist in potential within your consciousness. The moment you become aware of something you want, it is not introduced to you from the outside, it is awakened within you. And what is awakened in you is yours to claim if you will believe it is already done. The mind that understands this lives differently. It does not petition the world. It does not beg for approval or opportunity. It does not negotiate with facts. It simply accepts the invisible as the only truth and waits for the visible to catch up. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. You are aligning with the eternal structure of reality, where every outcome already exists. You do not create the thing by effort, you select it by assumption, and once assumed, you must believe that it is yours, not in process, not in progress, but now. This belief is not mental fantasy, it is a deep inner agreement. You begin to think from the place where the desire is already realized. And in doing so, you take ownership. You walk as one who has. You speak as one who is. You no longer concern yourself with how it will appear, because you know that assumption is the cause. All bridges to its fulfillment will unfold naturally, without strain, without planning. Your task is to remain in the feeling of the fulfilled state. And from this place, your world bends to reflect your claim. To believe it's yours is not to merely say it, but to feel the inner certainty of possession. Think of the way you hold a memory. You do not hope it happened, you know it did. So too must you treat the vision of your desire. It must become as familiar and accepted as any memory, so that when you think of it, you do not reach forward, you look inward. And when the world contradicts it, you do not feel shaken, because your truth is no longer built on appearances. It is built on inner knowing. The one who believes it is theirs, no longer entangled with time. They are not counting the days, they are not measuring the delay, because they are already there in imagination. Time is only necessary for the external world to align with the internal selection. But to the one who has assumed the end, time is no longer relevant. They have stepped beyond it. They have moved into the eternal now, where all things are complete. They no longer work toward the goal, they rest in it. When you say to yourself, "This is mine," you must mean it in the most literal way. You must let that declaration reach the depths of your subconscious. And you must not revisit the desire from the standpoint of lack. You must revisit it from the standpoint of fulfillment. This difference is everything. To revisit it in longing is to postpone it again, but to revisit it in gratitude, in acceptance, in joy, that is to reinforce its presence. Your inner conversations must reflect your new status. You do not ask, when will it happen? You affirm, it has already happened, and I am now living in its evidence. All things respond to this inner conviction. The world, the people, the conditions, all of it is shaped by what you believe is true for you. You may not see how it will come. That is not your concern. You are not the orchestrator of the mechanics. You are the one who assigns the meaning. And once you assign the meaning of ownership to your desire, all the elements required for its physical expression are summoned. They are drawn into your orbit, not by force, but by law. You must learn to remain undisturbed by appearances. You must become so inwardly convinced that even when the opposite shows itself, you do not react. You know what you know. You stand in the quiet assurance of one who already holds the deed. You are not trying to persuade the world, you are persuading yourself. And once the self is persuaded, the world must echo it. The entire process is a shift in identity. You are not reaching for your desire as an outsider. You are claiming it as the rightful heir. You are not a beggar at the gate. You are the owner of the house. And all that you desire is already included in your inheritance. Your only task is to embody the version of yourself that has already received. That self already exists. And the moment you move into it, through imagination and belief, you begin to live from its power. This belief is your passport. It gives you access to realities the world says are out of reach. But they are not far, they are near, closer than breath, waiting only for your agreement. And the moment you say, "This is mine," and truly mean it, you unlock the door. The unseen begins to flow into the seen, and life responds, not as a reward, but as a reflection. Because reality cannot help but mirror the man who dares to believe that he already is. Your imagination is the only condition. There is no circumstance, no event, no person, no time, no system, and no economy that stands between you and the fulfillment of your desire, except the state of your imagination. This truth may seem too simple, and yet within its simplicity lies the power to alter every detail of your experience. The world you see is but the outward projection of your inward assumption. It is not reality that conditions imagination. It is imagination that conditions reality. When you accept this truth, you cease to wait. You cease to struggle. You no longer try to fix the external world. You begin to govern the only faculty that matters, the one within. Imagination is not idle. It is not fantasy. It is spiritual activity. Every act of imagination is a seed. When impressed upon the subconscious with feeling, that seed must produce fruit in your world. It may not come through the channels you expect. It may arrive through what appears to be coincidence, but its arrival is certain, because the cause has been set. You must come to understand that nothing happens outside of imagination. Everything, absolutely everything, is first imagined. Whether you do so consciously or unconsciously, every condition of your life is born from a pattern within you. And the greatest tragedy is not failure, it is unconscious creation. Most people create by default. They react, they worry, they doubt, and in doing so they sow seeds of unwanted reality. But the one who awakens understands that the imagination is sovereign and begins to plant deliberately. He no longer accepts what is presented, he presents what must be accepted. The great illusion is that life is responding to action, but it is not. Life is responding to assumption. You may act all day, but if your assumption contradicts your action, the result will reflect the assumption. The inner always overrides the outer. Your effort means nothing if it is not born from the state of already having. You may chase wealth while assuming lack. You may pursue love while assuming rejection. You may seek healing while assuming illness. And the result will not come from the effort. It will come from the hidden conviction. This is why imagination is everything. To imagine is to create. To feel is to impress. And to persist in that feeling is to manifest. The world is not waiting to bless you, it is waiting to reflect you. When you change your internal image, you change your external experience, not by effort, but by law. The law responds to your inner world, not your pleas. If you imagine yourself to be poor, lonely, unwanted, or unseen, life will dress itself in forms to prove you right. But if you imagine yourself wealthy, loved, powerful, and fulfilled, life must reshape itself accordingly. It is not your words the universe obeys, it is your inner state. The imagination is not limited by reason. It is not bound by facts. It does not ask whether something is likely or possible. It accepts what is felt as real and moves it into form. And so the question is not, is it realistic? The question is, can I feel it now? Can you dwell in the sensation of your wish fulfilled? Can you construct within your own mind a scene that implies its completion? Can you sit with that feeling, nurture it, return to it, and wear it like a garment? If you can do this, the outer world must bow. It does not matter what your current condition is. It does not matter how long it has persisted. It does not matter what the world says is possible. All that matters is the image you hold within. That image is more powerful than facts. It is more enduring than circumstance. And when it is fully believed, when it becomes the foundation of your self-concept, the world will conform. Because it is compelled to do so. You do not need permission from anyone or anything. You need only the courage to assume the feeling of your fulfilled desire and the discipline to persist in it. Every miracle begins in imagination. Before the blind see, before the lame walk, before the poor rise, there is a moment of inner conception. The outer change is merely the echo. You are not required to explain this to others. You are not required to justify your vision. You are only required to assume its truth. You must value your inner experience above the opinions of others, above the evidence of the senses, above the limitations of history. Your world will always mirror what you are conscious of being. If you become conscious of being whole, loved, and victorious, then all forms of life will begin to mirror that wholeness. You do not need to strive toward your desire. You do not need to force life into cooperation. You simply need to revise your assumption and remain loyal to it. The bridges will build themselves. The details will unfold. The imagination is not weak, it is divine. It is the creative power of all reality, and the one who learns to command it with love, discipline, and clarity becomes master of his fate. So the only condition is within you. It is the state you occupy, the image you hold, and the feeling you dwell in. Once you choose the desired state and persist in it, all things align. No obstacle can stand against sustained inner vision, and no dream is too distant for the one who knows it is already done in the realm of imagination. The world is not moved by your need, it is moved by your assumption, and assumption is imagination in motion. Let it move, and everything else must follow. And so now you know, your winning season is not ahead of you, it is within you. It begins not when the world agrees, but when you agree. When you assume your victory and live from the end, you shift the axis of your entire world. The feeling of the wish fulfilled, repeated with conviction, becomes law. It moves the immovable. It builds bridges unseen. And it carries you not by effort, but by assumption. Your senses will cry out with facts. Let them speak, but do not follow. You are not here to react. You are here to create. And creation begins in the unseen. Trust your imagination, for it is the one power given to you that mirrors the infinite. Persist in your assumption and life will yield. Speak to yourself as one who already has. Dwell in the joy of already being. Let repetition become your rhythm and conviction your You are not waiting for your winning season. You are standing in it now. All things are prepared. The moment you decide that it is done, it begins, not in the world, but in your inner world. And as within, so without. So feel it real. Assume it boldly. Persist with joy. Because what you imagine with faith is already yours. Let the world reflect it in time. Your winning season has begun. Live from it. Walk in it. And watch the unseen become seen.